Around the age of 30, I decided it was time to follow the path everyone expected of me. I met David through a mutual acquaintance. He was kind, had a stable career, and seemed like the perfect partner to build a quiet life with. After 6 months of dating, we said our vows. For the next 10 years, our life was a calm sea, steady, predictable, but profoundly cold. The silence in our home was most deafening in our bedroom. As I approached 40, the ticking of my biological clock became a thunderous beat. David, I whispered one night, we've been together for a decade. I want to hold our child. We need to try harder. Seeing each other like this once every 2 months. It isn't a marriage. But David would always turn away, murmuring that he wasn't ready, leaving me to wonder if I was the problem. The wall of lies finally crumbled on a cold Thanksgiving evening. With my father-in-law, Robert, sitting at the table, I made a final plea for our future. Robert had always treated me like his own daughter, and I knew he longed for a grandchild. But as I spoke, David's hands began to shake. He put down his wine glass and uttered words that shattered our world into a million pieces. I'm sorry, to both of you, but I'm gay. I've hidden it for 10 years to protect this family. But I can't breathe anymore. The room fell into a suffocating silence. Robert, a man of tradition and deep faith, gasped for air before collapsing from the shock. That night, David packed his bags and walked out, severing ties with his past to find his own truth. He left behind a broken home, and a father who was now paralyzed from a severe stroke. As the divorce papers were being drawn, people urged me to walk away. Why stay for a man who isn't even your family anymore? They asked. But I couldn't. Robert was the only person who had truly seen me. During those 10 lonely years, I stayed. I became his hands and feet, cleaning his sores and whispering stories to him while the world forgot he existed. Through his facial paralysis, Robert would struggle to speak, his eyes brimming with tears every time I held his hand. My sweet daughter. He would mumble incoherently, you are too good for us. My son's sins, they are not your burden. I am so sorry. I would simply squeeze his hand and tell him that love isn't a debt, it's a choice. The day finally came when I had to say my final goodbye. I was moving on to a new chapter. Father, I said, calling him that for the last time. Today is the last time I'll see you as your daughter-in-law. Robert looked at me with a clarity I hadn't seen in years. Go, he whispered. Don't look back. Find the happiness my son couldn't give you. That is my last wish. A year later, life gave me a miracle. I met Mark, a man who didn't fear my past, but embraced the scars it left behind. We married, and soon, I was holding a beautiful baby boy in my arms. The darkness of the past 10 years felt like a distant dream until a phone call from the police station pulled me back. Robert has passed away alone in his home, the officer said. We couldn't reach his son, but we found a tattered note with your name and number in his pocket. He wanted us to call you. I was devastated. The thought of him dying alone broke my heart. I hesitated to tell Mark, fearing it was too much to ask of my new husband. But Mark, with a heart wider than I ever imagined, held me close. We are going, he said firmly. He was the one who taught you about grace. We won't let him leave this world alone. We will give him the farewell he deserves. We stood as the chief mourners at his funeral, holding my son in front of Robert's portrait. I realized the note in his pocket wasn't a burden, it was a lighthouse. He held onto my number because he wanted to be sure, even from the afterlife, that I had finally found the happiness he prayed for. The greatest happiness of life is the conviction that we are loved. Loved for ourselves, or rather, loved in spite of ourselves. Robert's last gift wasn't an inheritance or a house. It was the realization that I was worthy of love. I live every day now in honor of that gift. Grateful for the man who let me go and the man who walked me home. If you want to listen more our real story, please press like button and subscribe this channel. And share this story to your people. To captivate an American audience, the storytelling should lean into the concept of the unsung hero and the profound impact of preserving dignity. In American culture, the idea that someone would go out of their way to make a sacrifice look like a mistake just to protect a child's pride is deeply moving. Here is the 10-minute narrated style version of the story in English, designed to tug at the heartstrings. The baker's beautiful mistake. When I was a young boy, my walk to school was haunted by the most intoxicating, yet painful aroma. It came from a small, cozy bakery at the corner of my neighborhood. Every morning, as the ovens were cracked open, the scent of fresh bread, and sweet, velvety cream would drift through the air, teasing my senses. But for me, that sweetness was a luxury I couldn't afford. With holes in my socks and pockets that held nothing but air, I learned to keep my head down, walking faster to escape the temptation that I knew wasn't meant for me. Then came a morning that changed everything. As I was hurrying past, trying to ignore the growl in my stomach, a gruff but warm voice called out, "Hey, kid. Hold on a second." I looked up to see the baker standing there, his apron dusted with flour like a badge of honor. He held out a pastry that looked like a disaster. It was crushed, lopsided, with swirls of fresh cream oozing out of the sides. He tossed it toward me with a casual shrug. "Here, take this. I completely messed up the batch this morning. It's too ugly to sell, and I'd only end up throwing it in the trash. Do me a favor and eat it, will you?" I caught the warm, heavy pastry in my hands, stunned. The moment I took a bite, the cool, rich cream melted on my tongue. It was, without a doubt, the most incredible thing I had ever tasted. The baker just rubbed the back of his neck, looking a bit embarrassed, and shouted, "Don't think twice about it, it's garbage anyway," before disappearing back into the shop. But a strange thing started happening. The next day, and every day after that, the baker was waiting with another failure. One day, the cream puffs were too puffy. The next, the bread was too flat. Every single morning, I received a warm, fresh pastry, filled to the brim with cream. He called them mistakes, but they tasted like heaven. Before long, we became the unlikeliest of friends. I would sit on a small wooden stool in the corner of the shop, chattering away about my life, how I finally aced my math test, or how I'd gotten into a scuffle on the playground. He would just listen, letting out a soft chuckle now and then, as he kneaded the dough. That bakery became more than a shop. It was my sanctuary, the one place where I felt truly seen and cared for. However, as the years passed and the awkwardness of my teenage years set in, I began to feel a strange sense of shame. I became acutely aware of my poverty, and the ugly bread started to feel like a reminder of what I lacked. I began to avoid that street, choosing longer routes to school just to bypass the baker's kindness. Eventually, I left for college in a different city, and the memory of the baker faded into the background of my busy new life. 10 years passed in the blink of an eye. Not long ago, I found myself back in my hometown. As I drove past the old corner, my heart sank. The bakery windows were dark, and a faded sign on the door read, "Closed indefinitely due to health reasons." In that moment, a wave of nostalgia hit me so hard, it took my breath away. I suddenly craved the taste of that ugly cream bread more than anything in the world. I managed to track down a phone number, and eventually found myself standing in a quiet hospital room. The man in the bed was a shadow of the giant I remembered. He was frail and pale, his hands no longer covered in flour, but hooked to IV lines. I took his weathered hand in mine, my voice trembling. "Sir, do you remember me? I'm the boy you used to give the ugly bread to." His wife, who was sitting by the window, wiped a tear from her eye and spoke for him. "Young man, you should know the truth. My husband spent every morning for 10 years, purposely crushing those pastries." I froze, unable to speak. She continued, her voice soft with emotion. "We lost our only son when he was very young. After that, whenever my husband saw a hungry child on their way to school, he wanted to do something. But he knew that just giving food away might hurt a child's pride. So, every morning, he would take a perfect, beautiful pastry and press his hand down on it. He made them ugly on purpose, just so he could give them to you without making you feel like a charity case." My heart shattered as the realization washed over me. For a decade, that man had been meticulously destroying his own hard work, just to protect the dignity of a poor boy. He wasn't giving me his scraps, he was giving me his best, disguised as a mistake, so that I could hold my head high while I ate. Now, I visit that hospital room every single week. I sit by his bed and tell him stories, just like I did when I was a boy. Because now, it's my turn to be the ugly bread, for him to be the comfort and the sweetness. In his darkest hour, returning the love that once saved me. Kindness is the language which the deaf can hear, and the blind can see. Mark Twain. The cream that overflowed from those crushed pastries wasn't just sugar and milk. It was a pure, unspoken grace. That grace is now the greatest strength I carry in my life. If this story touched your heart, please double tap the screen and hit the plus button. Your likes and subscriptions give us the strength to keep creating. Please share this story with the people you love. I was 5 years old when the geography of my world changed after my grandmother passed away, leaving my grandfather. In the silence of a house that felt too large, I moved my small pillow into his room. My mother worried that a young child shouldn't be confined to a single room with an old man. But even then, I could feel the cold, unspoken loneliness radiating from his back. I didn't want him to face that chill alone. What started as a child's empathy became a shared life that spanned 14 years. That cramped room was our private universe. In my earliest memories, my grandfather's hands were like old bark, rough, weathered, and calloused from a lifetime of toil. Yet, every night, those hands became as light as feathers, gently tucking the edges of the blanket around me. The scratchy warmth of his touch was my security. A silent poem of love more comforting than any luxury. As the years blurred and I grew a full head taller than him, our nightly ritual naturally reversed. It became my turn to walk to the foot of his bed and tuck the covers around his tired feet. He often kept a small radio on all night. The static-filled frequencies, old songs, and the low hum of announcers would sometimes interrupt my sleep as I studied for exams. My mother would urge me to move into my own room so I could focus on my future, but I always shook my head. If I leave, I thought, who will he talk to in the dead of night? To me, that radio wasn't noise, it was the rhythm of his life. A constant reassurance that he was still there, breathing beside me. Then came the spring of last year. Just as the flowers began to peek through the earth, my grandfather collapsed. In the sterile, rhythmic beeping of the intensive care unit, he took my hand with a grip that had grown frail. With a look of profound apology, a look I had never seen on his face in 14 years, he whispered as if sharing a painful secret, "My dear boy, could you help me clean myself?" It was a request for help with his most basic needs. A moment where a man of pride surrendered his final dignity to the one he loved most. Without a second of hesitation, I smiled and whispered back, "Grandfather, of course. I've got you." As I cared for him, I realized that the warmth he had tucked into my blankets as a child was finally flowing back through my own hands to him. But I didn't know it would be our last exchange of warmth. He passed away only a day later, leaving in a hurry, as if he didn't want to be a burden for a moment longer. In the face of such a sudden goodbye, I wept more bitterly than anyone. "Grandfather, how could you leave like this? It's not fair," I cried into the empty air of our room. While sorting through his few belongings, I found his old ID card and taped it to my desk at eye level. I needed to believe he was still watching over me. A few months later, during a meeting with my school counselor, I faced a wound I wasn't prepared for. The teacher glanced at my records and said casually, "Oh, your grandfather passed away, right?" Then, with a cold black pen, he drew 2 thick lines through my grandfather's name on the family chart. My heart felt as if it were being pierced. That thin trail of ink felt like a blade, cutting the last physical cord between us. On paper, he had ceased to exist, but in my heart, I wanted to scream that he was more alive than ever. I am now in my final year of high school. Whenever the pressure of my studies feels like it's choking me, I look up at that old ID card on my desk. "Grandfather," I whisper, "math is so hard today. Am I doing okay? Are you proud of me?" In those moments, I can still feel the warmth of those 14 years filling the room. Someone once said that those we love never truly die. They simply go ahead of us to prepare a place in our hearts where they can stay forever. Because of the place he prepared so lovingly within me, I know I am never truly alone. I carry the warmth he taught me, and I pick up my pen once more. Family love is stronger than death, even though it can't stop death from happening. But no matter how hard death tries, it can't separate people from love. It can't take away our memories either. If you enjoyed this true story of love and devotion, please double tap the screen and hit the follow button. Your support, follows, and likes give me great strength. Thank you. It was just another Tuesday in Pennsylvania, or so I thought. I've been a firefighter for 20 years. But some mornings, the air just feels different, heavy, like it's holding its breath. Then the alarm ripped through the station. Structure fire at the chemical plant. Multiple victims trapped. When we arrived, the sky was already bruised with thick, black smoke. The building was a skeleton of steel, being devoured by a hungry, orange beast. The heat was so intense it felt like it was peeling the skin off your face even through the visor. People were screaming, pointing at the 3rd floor. Through the iron bars of a window, I saw a hand, pale and desperate, waving for a miracle. We can't wait for the ladder truck. I shouted to my partner, Mike. He's running out of time. We breached the entrance, and immediately, we were in another world. A world of shadows and fire. The stairs were groaning under the weight of the flames. And every step felt like a gamble with death. We reached the 3rd floor and kicked down a heavy steel door. There he was, a man, collapsed, his lungs filled with poison. With the last bit of strength in his soul, he grabbed my jacket. Please. He wheezed, his eyes glassy with the end of everything. 2nd floor. The back room. My wife. My baby. He went limp. We didn't have enough oxygen for everyone. It was a choice no human should ever have to make. I looked at Mike. Get him out of here. Now. What about you, Jack? Mike yelled through his mask. I'm going back down for the family. I descended back into the furnace alone. The 2nd floor was a maze of fire. I found the room. The door was jammed, but I threw my entire weight against it until it splintered. In the corner, a young woman was huddled, shielding a tiny bundle in her arms. She had given everything she had to protect that child. I stripped off my own oxygen mask and pressed it against her face. Breathe, I commanded. You have to stay with me. I tucked the infant inside my turnout coat, right against my chest. I could feel the baby's heartbeat fast. Fragile, like a bird trapped in a storm. Not today, I whispered. You are not dying today. I carried the woman and the child through a corridor of falling debris. We burst through the exit just as the building gave its final roar and collapsed into a pile of ash. The woman looked at me. Her eyes filled with a gratitude so deep it was painful. Take care of my son, she whispered before the world took her away. That day, the fire stole a father and a mother. But it couldn't steal the child. When I learned there was no family left to claim him, I looked at the little boy in the hospital crib. I saw the same fire in his eyes, a fire that wanted to live. I've got you, kid, I said, my voice cracking. I've got you. That was the day I stopped being just a firefighter and became a father. I still remember the first night I brought him home. The roar of the fire and the scream of the sirens were gone, replaced by a silence so fragile I was afraid to breathe. In America, we talk about the golden hour in Rescue, the window where a life can be saved. But for me, the real rescue began in the quiet hours of that first night, holding a child who had lost everything before he even knew what he had. My fellow firefighters called me crazy. Jack, you're a single guy on a dangerous shift. How are you going to raise a kid with no past? But I knew something they didn't. I knew that the way his father gripped my coat in that burning building wasn't just a plea for help, it was a sacred handoff. It was a dying man trusting a stranger with his soul. Hey there, little firefly, I whispered as I rocked him to sleep. I named him Aiden, an old name meaning little fire. I wanted him to know that fire doesn't just destroy, it also warms. It also lights the way. Aiden grew up fast. He was a typical American kid obsessed with baseball, loves camping on the weekends, and has a laugh that can clear the darkest clouds. But as he got older, I saw the shadows. I saw his biological father's strength in his shoulders, and his mother's kindness in his eyes. I kept the truth tucked away in a dusty box in the attic, waiting for the day his heart was strong enough to carry it. That day came on a humid July 4th. While the rest of the neighborhood was celebrating with fireworks, Aiden walked into the living room holding that old box. Inside were the charred newspaper clippings from 20 years ago, a pair of tiny singed baby shoes, and a faded photograph of a young couple he didn't recognize. Dad. His voice was a jagged edge. Was this me? Were you the one who pulled me out? The air in the room became as thick as that smoke from long ago. I sat him down and told him everything. I told him how his father used his last breath to save him. I told him how his mother gave up her oxygen so he could take his first breath of fresh air. When I finished, Aiden didn't pull away. He looked at the scars on my hands, the ones I got reaching for him, and he wept. But they weren't tears of sorrow, they were tears of realization. I thought I was an orphan, Dad, he said, gripping my hand. But I realize now, I've been loved by two sets of parents. One gave me life, and you gave me a reason to live it. I won't let their sacrifice be for nothing. That night, we didn't just share a story. We shared a legacy. We weren't bound by blood, but by something much stronger. A promise made in the heart of a furnace that would never, ever be broken. Years passed like a fast-moving current, And Aiden grew into a man who carried the weight of the world with a smile. On the day I retired from the force, after 30 years of fighting the beast, Aiden stood in our kitchen with a look I knew all too well. It was the look of a man who had found his calling. "Dad," he said, handing me an envelope. I passed. "I'm heading to the academy in the morning." My heart did a somersault. As a father, I wanted to lock the door and keep him safe from the world. I knew the smell of burning plastic, the sound of a roof groaning before it collapses, and the nightmares that follow a shift. But as a firefighter, I knew I couldn't stop the sun from rising. "You're sure about this, Aiden? You could be anything. An architect, a doctor, a lawyer." He looked me straight in the eyes, and for a second, I saw his biological father standing there. "I want to go into the places everyone else is running out of, Dad, just like you did for me. I want to be the reason someone gets a second chance at life." A few months later, I stood at the graduation ceremony. When they called his name, I was the one who pinned the badge on his chest. My hands, now wrinkled and scarred, trembled as I fastened that silver shield to his crisp blue uniform. He saluted me, but then he broke protocol and gave me a hug that nearly knocked the wind out of me. "Be safe out there, son," I whispered. "And remember, your greatest job isn't just saving lives, it's coming back home to me." Then came the night every firefighter's family fears. A massive blaze at a downtown high-rise. I sat by the scanner, my knuckles white, listening to the chaos. Then, I heard his voice over the radio, calm, steady, just like I taught him. "Engine 4, we have a visual on a victim entering the structure now." The minutes felt like hours. But then, the local news showed a feed from the scene. Out of a wall of thick, gray smoke, a figure emerged. It was Aiden. He was covered in soot, his gear blackened. But in his arms, he was cradling a small child wrapped in a blanket. He didn't stop for the cameras. He ran straight to the paramedics, handed over the child, and then slumped against the side of the truck, gasping for air. When he finally took off his mask and looked into the lens of the camera, he wasn't looking at the reporter. He was looking at me. He gave a small, weary thumbs up. When he came home the next morning, smelling of ash and victory, we didn't need words. We sat on the porch as the sun came up. The cycle was complete. The boy who was saved by the fire had become the man who mastered it. The legacy of ash had finally turned into a legacy of light. In the end, fire is a paradoxical thing. It can consume a home in minutes, but it can also forge a bond that lasts for eternity. Jack and Aiden's story isn't just about a rescue, it's a testament to the humanity spirit, the belief that we are our brother's keeper, and that a family is defined not by the blood in our veins, but by the sacrifices we make for one another. As Aiden stands on the front lines today, wearing the same badge his father once wore, he carries more than just equipment. He carries the hopes of the parents who couldn't stay, and the love of the man who chose to be his father. Their story reminds us that even in our darkest, most muddled hours, there is a light. If this story moved you, don't let the flame stop here. Join our community of heroes. Hit that like button to honor the brave men and women who run toward the danger. Follow us for more soul-stirring stories that prove humanity is still beautiful. We want to hear from you. Who is the hero in your life that gave you a second chance? Share your gratitude in the comments below. Do you know someone who needs a reminder that hope is never lost? Share this video right now. Your one share could be the light someone else needs today. The scent of home, a burger, and a 5 years promise. My earliest memory isn't the warmth of a mother's embrace. It is the bone-chilling metallic clang of a front door slamming shut. That sound was the first sentence written on my young soul, a funeral toll announcing the start of a long, endless winter. My mother had left, choosing the hand of another man over her own children. She left before my father returned from work, leaving behind nothing but a hollow perfume bottle on the vanity, and a few stray strands of hair. From that day on, the word mother became a forbidden curse in our home. Her absence was filled instead by the calloused hands of my father and the suffocating dust of construction sites. By day, my father hauled bricks under a scorching sun until his skin blistered. By night, without a moment's rest, he rode a battered motorcycle to deliver food in the dark. I remember one rainy night, when his bike skidded on the slick pavement. He returned home a bloody mess. His pants were torn, and his knees were shattered, oozing crimson. Yet, he didn't moan in pain. His only worry was the crumpled black plastic bag tucked inside his jacket. Inside were 2 cheap burgers from the corner market. They weren't gourmet burgers, they were just soggy buns, thin patties, and a mess of shredded cabbage drowned in ketchup and mayo. But to us, they were the only luxury in a world that offered none. My little brother, Doan, would eat with sauce smeared all over his face, silent until the very last bite. Then, he would look up with a beaming smile and say, "Sis, when I grow up, I'm going to be the boss of the best burger shop in the world. I'll make burgers with the thickest patties just for you and Dad. And I won't charge you a single penny." That innocent promise was the only light in our dim house. But poverty is a cliff that hard work alone cannot always scale. My father poured every ounce of his life into us, never noticing his own body was rotting away. The cough he dismissed as just dust eventually claimed him. He collapsed and passed away before I could even receive my high school diploma. We didn't even have money for a funeral. He left behind a pair of worn-out boots, a frayed wallet, and my little brother. The world was cold to 2 orphans. When we couldn't even afford a tiny cubicle room, I had to take my 16-year-old brother's hand and make a tearful vow. "Doan, I'm going to work at a restaurant that provides a bed. I just need 1 year. 1 year to save enough for a small room for us. Can you wait for me? I'll come back for you. I promise." Doan reached out to grab my sleeve, then pulled his hand back and forced a smile. His eyes were wide with terror, but he didn't want to be a burden. "Go, sis. I'll be okay. I'll think about those burgers and wait for you." I didn't know then that those would be the last words we'd speak for a long time. Life became a living hell. I worked in restaurant kitchens, sleeping 3 hours a night. My fingertips were cracked from water and lye, and I constantly smelled of old grease. But I lived for the numbers growing in my bank account. Every night, I would close my eyes and conjure the sweet scent of those burgers my father used to bring home. It was the only fuel I had. 18 months later, I finally had the deposit for a small studio. I ran back to our old neighborhood, my arms full of his favorite snacks. But I didn't find my brother's laugh. I found a giant excavator, a pile of rubble, and a vacant lot overgrown with weeds. The neighborhood had been demolished for redevelopment. The foster home where he stayed, the neighbors, everyone was gone. Doan had vanished. My life stopped that day. For 5 years, I wandered the country. I haunted missing persons bureaus and handed out flyers until my hands bled. I was mocked by drunks and collapsed in the pouring rain, screaming his name. Every month, I returned to that cold, vacant lot to wail at the empty earth. Those 5 years felt like an eternity on the rack. Then, one day, I was passing through a crowded market in a city I didn't know. A familiar scent caught the wind and pierced my soul. The aroma of butter toasted buns and the sizzle of a searing patty. It was the scent of my father's return, the smell of the only comfort we ever knew. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. This wasn't just food, it was a ghost calling to me. I ran toward the smell, down a narrow alley. There, behind a small, weathered stall, stood a young man with his back turned, flipping patties with a rhythmic, familiar motion. I didn't need to see his face. Every fiber of my being screamed his name. "Doan, is that you?" The young man froze. He turned slowly. 5 years had filled out his shoulders, but his eyes were the same, the eyes of the boy who looked at a burger bag like it was the entire world. He dropped his spatula and collapsed. "Sis, I knew you'd come. I knew if I made these burgers, the smell would find you. I've been here every single day, making them so you wouldn't get lost. So you could follow the scent home." In the middle of that busy market, we held each other and sobbed until we couldn't breathe. He had built that shop as a lighthouse, keeping our father's promise alive for 5 years just to guide me back to him. Today, we live together, vowing never to let go again. Our father is gone, and our mother threw us away. But my father's ragged love became the scent of a burger, a miracle that gathered a broken family back into one. Love looks not with the eyes, but with the mind. And therefore, even after the longest journey, souls will find their way back home. No matter how cold the world feels, true love and a faithful heart will eventually bear the fruit of a miracle. Just as the scent of a father's sacrifice saved these 2 siblings. Your miracle is waiting for you, too. Never stop believing. If this story touched your heart, please double tap the screen. Subscribe and follow to share this light of hope with the world. Your small gesture could be the strength someone needs to keep going. Thank you for listening. The light you left behind. 9 years girl's last choice. At 29, my life wasn't just interrupted, it was erased. One moment, I was stepping off a curb, thinking about a deadline or a cold beer in the fridge. The next, 80 kilometers per hour of cold, unyielding steel shattered my reality. My last memory of the lit world was the flickering, sickly amber of a street lamp reflected in a rain puddle. Then, the ink fell. It felt as if a giant hand had spilled a bottle of midnight over every single page of my future. When the doctors finally peeled back the gauze, the verdict was a silent scream: permanent blindness. I spent my first weeks in the general ward pinned to the bed like a broken insect, waiting for the clock to simply stop ticking. I hated the sun for rising when I couldn't see it. I hated the nurses for their pitying whispers. I was drowning in a silence so heavy it felt like stone. And then, through the suffocating gravity of my despair, I heard it. A voice like silver bells, sharp, clear, and impossibly bright. "Hey, mummy man, are you awake, or are you just pretending?" I felt a surge of bitter, jagged annoyance. I didn't want an audience for my funeral. "Go away, kid. I'm busy being dead," I snapped. But she didn't budge. I heard the rhythmic scuff of small slippers approaching until I could feel the warmth of a presence right by my ear. "Whoa," she breathed. "Why are all those bandages wrapped around your head? You look exactly like a mummy from the movies. It's actually kind of badass. Do you have ancient curses too?" I wanted to yell, to chase her away with my anger. But there was a magnetic, crystalline purity in her laugh that caught in my throat. Her name was Young-A. She was 9 years old, and she had decided, without my permission, to stage a daily invasion of my darkness. "Mister, you're sighing again," she'd say during the long afternoons. "You're going to run out of oxygen if you keep wasting it on those big, sad huffs." "Young-A," I whispered one day, my voice cracking like dry wood. "Imagine the lights went out. Imagine they stayed out forever. Wouldn't you be terrified?" "I'm not just sighing. I'm trying to figure out how to live in a tomb." I felt a tiny, feverishly warm hand rest on mine. It was a fragile weight, yet it felt like the only thing keeping me from drifting into space. "My mom says being sick is just a matter of perspective," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. "If you call yourself a patient, you're stuck. But if you think of it as a very long, very weird picnic, then it's just a break from the world. You know, a girl in the bed over there went to heaven last week. Mom said she was so good, God needed a new star. Stars stay up there so people like us won't be scared of the dark. Maybe your eyes are dark because your personal star isn't finished being polished yet. It takes time to make something that bright." Those words, spoken by a child who should have been playing with dolls, cut deeper than any theological sermon. "Young-A," I asked, "why are you here? What's your secret?" She giggled, a sound that felt like light hitting water. "It's a secret for now. But the doctor said I'll be all better in a month. He said I'd never have to step foot in this hospital again." Imagine that. Total freedom. She spoke with such radiant pride that I actually felt a spark of hope for her. A small candle in my own dark room. We became the legend of the ward, the broken man and the little girl who held his hand. Young-A became my cinema. Every evening, we would walk the corridors, her small hand guiding my hesitant steps. She didn't just tell me where to walk, she painted the world. She told me the exact shade of angry purple in the storm clouds. The way the golden hour made the linoleum floors look like a river of honey. And how the trees outside the window were waving goodbye to the sun. "What's your dream, Young-A?" I asked her as we sat on a bench. The smell of rain in the air. "To marry you, obviously. We'll live in a house made of windows," she chirped. "Really? Am I that handsome for your eyes?" "Actually," she whispered, her breath smelling like strawberry milk, "you're kind of a mess. Your nose is crooked and you look like a grumpy monster. But I like monsters. They need the most love." We laughed until my chest ached. The first real pain I'd felt that didn't come from a needle. But our picnic ended abruptly. I was discharged 2 weeks later. I couldn't see her face. so I memorized the texture of her skin as I hooked my pinky around hers. It felt so thin, like parchment. "The day you get out," I promised. "I'll be waiting at the gates with the biggest ice cream on earth." "Pinky swear?" she whispered. "Pinky swear." A week later, the phone rang. A miracle, they said. A donor had been found. I was rushed into surgery, my mind racing, with the thought of finally seeing the little girl who had saved my soul. When the bandages finally came off, and the world blurred into a riot of color and light, I sobbed. I wept for the blue of the sky and the white of the sheets. My first thought was Young-A. I begged the nurses to find her. I wanted to see the mummy she had joked about. The doctor entered the room, his face a mask of iron-gray sorrow. He didn't say a word. He just handed me a file and a crumpled, yellow piece of paper. My heart didn't skip a beat. It felt like it had been physically removed from my chest. The donor was Young-A. She had been a terminal leukemia patient. When the doctor told her she'd be all better in a month, he wasn't talking about a recovery. He was talking about the end of her pain. She had known. That little girl, with her secret and her stars, had been walking toward the edge of the world. While pulling me back from it, Young-A's mother stood in the doorway, her eyes hollowed out by grief. She pressed the note into my shaking hand. In the jagged, oversized handwriting of a child who was running out of time, it read, "Mister, it's me, Young-A. I'm going into the big room now. That girl in the other bed went to the stars from here, and I think I might go join her. I'm not scared, because the dark isn't so bad when you have a friend. But just in case, if I go, I want to be your eyes. That way, I can see all the sunsets I told you about, and I can stay with you forever. Since I'm too little to marry you, I'll just be the light you see by. I love you, Mummy Man." My vision blurred instantly, but as the tears fell, I realized a devastating truth. These were her eyes. These were the eyes that had watched the angry purple clouds and the honey floors. My tears were her tears. I live my life differently now. Every time I see a sunset, I stand still until the last sliver of red disappears. Because I know she's watching it with me. I see the world through the grace of a 9-year-old saint who decided that my darkness was worth her light. We often think we need to see someone to love them, but I have learned that the most powerful love is the kind you can't see with your eyes. It's the kind that willingly burns itself out, so that a stranger doesn't have to walk in the dark. If you like this story, press like button and share this story to your people. And subscribe or follow. You can listen more real story. Thank you. The Midnight Creditor, a choice that saved 2 lives. The night it happened, the world felt unusually still. It was that thick, inky blackness, the kind of silence that feels heavy against your eardrums. I was drifting in the deep, dreamless sleep of the elderly when a subtle shift in the air permeated my room. It wasn't a sound, but a presence. My eyes fluttered open. In that hazy, surreal threshold between a dream and reality, my blood turned to ice. A shadow was standing at the foot of my bed. A chilling realization struck me with the force of a physical blow. I had a burglar. My heart plummeted into my stomach, a cold, heavy stone. All my life, I had watched scenes like this in thrillers, never imagining for a second that the final chapter of my quiet existence would be written in such violence. My mind raced, not to my life, but to the $10,000 in cash sitting in my nightstand, money I had withdrawn to pay for my grandson's tuition. If that money hadn't been there, I might not be alive to tell you this story today. The figure stepped forward, bathed in the faint, ghostly glow of a street lamp filtering through the blinds. To my absolute shock, it wasn't the hulking, hardened criminal I had envisioned. It was a boy, barely 20 years old, with a slight frame that seemed to shrink under the weight of his own shadow. In his hand, he held a kitchen knife. The blade glinted, terrifyingly sharp, as he pressed it against the soft skin of my throat. His voice was a muffled snarl, raw, with a desperation that bordered on madness. "Give me all of it. Everything, or I swear to God, I'll kill you right here." The word, kill, sent a primal shiver down my spine. Every hair on my arms standing on end. Death was inches away, held by a trembling hand. Yet, strangely, what tumbled from my lips was not a scream or a plea for mercy. It was a question I didn't even know I had the courage to ask. If I give you the money, son, do I have your word that you won't kill me? The young man's eyes, wide and frantic above his mask, flickered with hesitation. He hadn't expected me to speak with such calm. He nodded almost imperceptibly, his breathing ragged. Why, yes. Just give it to me. All of it. Don't lie, or you'll regret it. His voice was sharp, but as I looked closer, I saw a truth that contradicted his weapon. His eyes weren't filled with malice. They were etched with an agonizing, soul-crushing sadness. He didn't look like a predator. He looked like a drowning child, reaching for a blade instead of a life raft. Young man, I whispered, my voice steady, almost paternal. How long have you been living in this darkness? Shut up. Just shut up and give me the money. He hissed, pushing the blade closer until I could feel the cold bite of the steel. But even as he threatened me, his hand was shaking so violently I thought he might drop the knife. That tremor was a silent scream for help. I looked him in the eye, standing on the very precipice of eternity, and felt a profound, supernatural calm settle over me. I am at the end of my long journey, son. My children are grown. I've held my grandchildren. At my age, I have already lived my life. I have nothing left to lose. But you have everything. His rigid posture began to crumble. My words, meant to disarm him, were instead breaking him. I'll give you the money, I said, raising my hands slowly. I'll give you every cent I have. But let's make a deal, man to man. Instead of a robbery, what if this was a loan? What if I lent you this money to fix whatever is breaking you? He stared at me, paralyzed. Are you crazy? Why would you do that? Do you think I'm playing games at 80 years old? I asked softly. If this is your first time crossing this line, don't leave a permanent stain on your soul. Money is just paper to me now, it's trivial. But your future? That's far too precious to ruin. Over a desperate night. Take it as a loan. You don't have to be a thief tonight. At that moment, a single, heavy tear escaped his eye, soaking into the top of his mask. He began to shake, not from adrenaline, but from the sheer weight of his own grief. Looking back, I realize I was bold, perhaps even foolish, but I couldn't help it. I reached out and gently took his trembling hand, the one holding the knife. I can't do this, he choked out. He ripped off his mask and collapsed to the floor, burying his face in his hands. He began to sob raw, racking sounds that filled the silent room. Grandfather, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. My heart broke for him. I sat on the edge of the bed and untied the zip ties he had placed on my wrists. What a heavy burden you're carrying, I murmured. With a heart this fragile, you were never meant to be a criminal. It's my mother, he whispered, his voice hoarse. She's on dialysis. The bills. The power was cut off. We have nothing. I didn't know what else to do. I'm a coward. I'm so sorry. His words painted a masterpiece of desperation. I rose, went to the small wooden box in my closet, and took out my late wife's wedding ring, a cherished gold necklace, and the bundle of cash. I walked back and pressed them into his palms. As he turned to flee into the night, I gripped his arm one last time. Listen to me, Doan, I said, using the name I sensed was written in his character. Just walking away doesn't make this yours. Remember, this isn't stolen. This is a debt of honor between two friends. You repay me when you've succeeded. You repay me when you're standing on your own 2 feet, proud and strong. He looked at the gold and the cash, then back at me, his face wet with tears of relief and newfound purpose. I will work. I will work until my hands bleed, grandfather. I swear to you, I will repay every cent. I will be a man you can be proud of. Some might call me a fool. They might question my sanity for rewarding a man who held a knife to my throat. But if that night changed the trajectory of a soul, if it turned a potential killer into a grateful survivor, then it was the best investment I ever made. My only wish is that his path is now lit with hope, and that he never has to visit the shadows again. I hope that one day, he looks back not on a crime, but on the moment a stranger's kindness became his second chance at life. Love does not look with the eyes, but with the heart. For even the longest, darkest journey can find its way home, if someone is willing to hold the light. If you believe that our world still has room for mercy, and that a single hand of compassion can save a life, Please double tap the screen to share this hope. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe. And follow to help us spread stories that build a kinder, more compassionate world one soul at a time. Thank you for listening.